Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back, Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer. I just tried to go live and it didn't work. I need to figure out how to work the technology around that. I just hit, live through Zoom, live on YouTube, and there was just terrible echoing and background noise. So I ended that, which is a bit of a shame because I wanted to give you guys the chance. Hi, Coco. Say hi to everyone. I wanted to give you guys the chance for a bit of a kind of just a chat, Q&A, questions, chat, comments, whatever it may be about the lunar eclipse, which we are still in the energy of, which I was very blessed to see live last night from my location. I saw the entire thing. So, really was dedicated. I was there for 4 hours observing it, quite long. And that's the thing about lunar eclipses. They are usually much longer in length in terms of, viewing them. Solar eclipses are generally not as long. And the things that I wanted to, a couple of things that I just want to bring up very quickly. This will be a very short video. The eclipse that happened last night, which was at 5 degrees of Sagittarius, a total lunar eclipse. So very, very powerful, ruled by Jupiter, as we know. Jupiter is in Pisces at the moment. Very strong Sag, spiritual, philosophical component to this lunar eclipse. And perhaps if we want to think about that more from just general sort of day-to-day terms, it's could be very likely speaking to just our own processes of reflecting on what means something in our life, in terms of our whole life, the things that we are engaged with and connected to and participating in. What do those things mean to us? Well, Sagittarius is always wanting to find the meaning in anything that it's exploring, connecting with, and so forth. And of course, the other thing, and some of these things I have touched on, there's a few more ideas that I want to bring forward today. So it's a fire sign, it's a mutable sign, it's a total lunar eclipse. So it's got a mixture of yin-yang type of energies to it and mutability as well. Mutability being very fluid, actually, and very changeable. Fire is always about inspiration and action and energy, of course, and so is Sagittarius for that matter. So where is 5 degrees of Sagittarius in your birth chart, and the polarity of Sagittarius and Gemini? Because these eclipses that have just started with this lunar eclipse will follow through till the end of the year and will be covering basically your Sagittarius Gemini houses, including the Taurus Scorpio polarity as well. And this is very, very typical. We usually have eclipses that run through 2 different signs, but obviously adjacent to each other, right? And so we have this lunar eclipse that just occurred at 5 Sag. The solar eclipse that's coming up on the 10th of June is at 19 of Sag. And then a lunar eclipse after that, which is in November, the 19th of November, is 27 degrees Taurus. So that's right next to Gemini, isn't it? So really, and then finally, there's a total solar eclipse at the end of the year on the 4th of December back in Sagittarius. So effectively, when we are working with our chart this year, in amongst everything else that is going on, the solar and lunar eclipses are going to amplify and heighten and highlight those houses. So Scorpio, Taurus, Sagittarius, and Gemini, those 4 houses in your chart specifically, and perhaps more so the Sagittarius and Gemini polarities. So identifying where those houses are in your birth chart. Do you have any planets in those houses? Are any of those planets going to be aspecting by conjunction or opposition any of these solar or lunar eclipses? Each eclipse that comes up, what sign, element is it in? What type of eclipse is it? Is it a total? Is it an annular? Is it a partial? There are various types of eclipses, right? And so they also too talk to perhaps the power of the overt influence, if you like. Now, lunar eclipses have a much more subtle and subconscious theme or flavor to them, because the moon is a subconscious body. The moon in our chart, which speaks to many aspects of our beingness, our life, the form and structure that we create in our life as well, our biological rhythms, our emotional body, our relationship to women and mother, and numerous things. It's a body, a planet that is subconscious in nature. It's quite instinctual and quite habitual in nature. It reacts to things according to what it feels. That's the nature of the moon. So even the lunar eclipses, when they take place and they hit something off in the chart, that area of your chart is going to be the field of where subconscious and subtle layers of your life relative to that area of your chart are being activated, right? And then when the solar eclipse takes place, you know, in this case, it happens to be just a few weeks later that the next eclipse we have, which is a solar eclipse, it's an annular eclipse, so it's not a total, but it's still powerful. It's at 19 degrees of Gemini, so it's going to be in the same house, more than likely, of where the opposite house of where this lunar eclipse occurred, and that's on the 10th of June. And the next one, as I said previously, lunar partial 19th November, 27 Taurus, right next to your Gemini house. And again, finally, just to repeat this again, solar total eclipse, 4th of December, 12 degrees of Sag. So again, think about the lunar eclipses as the subtle subconscious content that could be activated in your life during this time. And why is it being activated? Because it's a full moon eclipse or a full moon period. So things get highlighted, right? It comes from the subconscious level of your being, moon, subconscious. It can be very subtle in nature. Lunar eclipses are just as powerful as solar eclipses, but they're just not overt. They're not so external usually, right? They're more of an internal subconscious kind of level of things that are being activated and stirred and highlighted. And that is in preparation for the upcoming solar eclipse, because the solar eclipse that takes place on the 10th of June, just in a few weeks' time, which is at 19 Gemini, opposite the house of where this lunar eclipse is in for you, that's going to be the field of the physical activity of housekeeping. It's a house in the birth chart, so it's an area of your life, and it's literally understood in those ways as well, in that the lunar eclipse prepares you. It brings up the subconscious, subtle material and layers that are usually not, we're not conscious about. Do you want to say something? Sorry, I am a mother to my baby girl, so I have to attend to that as well. All you mothers would understand. So, in short, what I'm suggesting is that we have two lunar eclipses, two solar eclipses. We've just been through the first lunar eclipse, which we are still in the frequency and vibration of all that. No doubt at all. It just happened hours ago. And there's lots of things that can come through in our field of consciousness in terms of what we can start to see now. Things that we've been out of touch with, or that's been just lying in our subconscious components. And as we're stepping towards the solar eclipse, 10th of June, which is 19 degrees of Sag, that will be the field and area of life. What house is it in your birth chart where the activity will be activated, where activity will take place, where potential crisis can also occur for people. Solar eclipses, by their very nature, tend to be fairly cataclysmic. Again, it depends on our level of consciousness and the preparation we've been doing leading up to that. These lunar eclipses are an opportunity providing us with a field to prepare the work that we are going to face, confront, deal with, recognize, understand when the solar eclipse hits off our birth chart, right? So, Lunar is preparing us with more subtle subconscious components that rise in our mind or our feelings, and then in turn are obviously experienced in our field and dynamics of relationships and so forth. And the solar eclipse will be a more overt, physical type of activity, experience, situation that will arise. And this is obviously going to be perhaps more important for people who have planets, in Sagittarius and Gemini, for instance, because these eclipses are hitting off your Sagittarius sun or your Gemini moon or your Sagittarius Mercury or whatever it may be. And that's, of course, dependent on orb as well. The lunar eclipse that was 5 degrees of Sagittarius last night, if you have Mercury at 27 degrees of Sagittarius, well, that's quite far, isn't it? So I don't sort of advise people on what orbs they should use. I think you need to explore that field yourself. There are general measures and terms, but orbs are a very controversial subject matter. And I think, truthfully, it takes your own personal observation and correlation through practice to see what orbs are actually the most appropriate. And it can vary as well. It can vary. It can change. Sometimes it might be 10 degrees and sometimes it might be 15 degrees. And that will work. That will show something up. So don't expect to get it all out of the books. You have to work, yourself at figuring these things out too. So, anyway, if these solar and lunar eclipses are triggering off personal planets specifically, and other planets as well, will also obviously have an effect. But just think about your basic sort of meaning of the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus. Um, think of the basic sort of definitions of what those planets correspond to, of course. And then when you're looking at the houses, so wherever Gemini and Sagittarius is for you in your birth chart, remember that the houses have so many layers to them. They're not as clear cut as some people might think. The houses are different to the signs as well and the planets. So there are a lot of things that you could get out of the ninth house or fifth house or second house, things that are not so obvious. And this is what requires, a fairly dedicated level of study and research into the different meanings of the houses. Now, if I was to use one of my medieval textbooks and delineate for you your fourth house, and this is a very good example, the fourth house, which we often correspond to family. It could be mother, it could be father, as in specific family, parental figures, ancestral lines, bloodlines, all that sort of stuff, family dynamics, complex relationships in the family home, the actual family home itself, all sorts of things like that, including your own soul, inner soul nature. Fourth house, it's the inner soul nature, the inner emotional security, development, maturity, evolution, all of that. But in one of my medieval textbooks, for example, if you want to determine the ending of life, because medieval astrology is like this, it's very black and white. It did look at things like the end of life, or when will I give birth to a child, or when will I get married. It really used a system where it was very predictive based and very black and white as well. So the area where that connects to the fourth house, the ending of life, as it were, for the individual, there's a whole system where you would look at what's called a triplicity ruler, okay, which is connected to the essential dignities and debilities, which is rulership, exaltation, detriment, fall, triplicities, decans, and so forth, right? There's five systems in the essential dignities and abilities, but the most typical ones that we hear about is when a planet is in rulership, when a planet is in detriment, fall, or exaltation. But there are other components to essential dignities and abilities, one which is called triplicity rulers, that I actually do pay attention to because I learnt that through my medieval studies. So if I wanted to know, I wouldn't look at the fourth house from the level of when will this person's life end as such. But if I wanted to look at what would the ending of their life look like as they approaching towards the end of those years, it would be connected to a particular triplicity ruler. And that will show me what the quality of the end of life would be like for that individual. At the same time, that concept of completion and finishing and endings, the other way to understand that would also be to look at this actually also shows us how does somebody end things in their life as well. So when you are finishing a relationship or ending something in your life, ending a chapter in your life, there's a triplicity ruler that would connect to that, that would show you your personal style, how you would go about ending things, right? So this is just an example of the other layers that exist in the 12 houses that are not common knowledge as such. So there are many, many layers that belong to each house that we would miss if we don't have the knowledge, of course, and we are trying to understand, this is the house that's activated at the moment for me from these solar and lunar eclipses. And if my knowledge is really limited and I'm having this particular experience, but it doesn't seem to connect to this house, and I'm scratching my head thinking, well, this particular event or experience is not described by this house. So where am I going wrong? Why is this showing up here? It may not be that you are going wrong at all, but you just don't have that knowledge base in your knowledge of astrology to identify that particular event as correlating to that particular house. So my point to this is there's always more to understand and know, and especially when it comes to the various manifestations of what each house can connect to. Another example would be the fifth house, which is the house of creativity, children, giving birth, hobbies, activities, playing, having fun, love affairs, and gambling and speculation. And I could go on and on and on. One other thing that it corresponds to from a medieval lens is it corresponds to honors. If you've received an honor in your life, like if you've received an award, for example, whether that's through your study or your work or whatever it is, that would be something that would be reflected through the triplicity ruler that connects to the fifth house. So there's another example for you. Okay, I'm going to leave it there, and I just wanted to stimulate a bit more thought, food for thought rather, in the reflection consideration about these solar lunar eclipses which are happening all year. They are kind of the lunar, the moon is the more subtle, as I said, subtle subconscious kind of layers that activates material. The solar will be the physical arena and field in which the experiences are likely to show up. The planets that may be involved with the solar or lunar eclipse will add a whole other dimension to the meaning of that eclipse. And these events are usually something, if it's like a really big event, you will see it through a whole bunch of other levels and techniques of things being activated in your chart. So there's a number of levels and fields that are being activated at any given time, and specifically when you've got a critical, life-changing, huge event going on, right? So anyway, the lunar eclipse was so mystical. It really was, as cliche as that may sound. It was so mystical and magical and there was no noise, there was nothing going on. There was just this incredible sky with this incredible moon, the lunar goddess, who just totally changed color over a course of about 4 hours, mind you, 3-4 hours. And it's the most surreal. I'm sure many of you have observed eclipses in your lifetime, both solar and lunar, if you've been lucky enough. It really is the most surreal experience. This is not the first lunar eclipse I've observed. I've observed many, and a solar eclipse as well in my time thus far. But it never feels exactly the same, and I suppose that's a large reflection of our own level of consciousness and evolution as well, and everything that's been stimulated and triggered and experienced in that moment, in the embodiment of that observation. It was freezing here because it's very, very cold here at the moment. Winter has already begun for us, and I was rugged up to the max, and I was still freezing, but I just stayed with it and absorbed every moment as much as I possibly could, and it was just magical. Okay, see you guys soon. Leave any questions below and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks. Bye.